What's going on, everybody? Glad you're back. It's precipitating. Not sure if you can see that. You might be able to hear it, but yeah, it's definitely coming down a little bit. People are always like, oh, you live in Washington, it must be cold and snowy and all that stuff. Not in the Sound where I live. It's normally pretty mild. But today, for whatever reason, we're getting a little bit of snow and it's not too bad. Anyway, it's hard to believe that it's been nearly a year since I released my 6 things that I'm ditching in 2023 video. It's one of the first videos that I ever made, and it was definitely one of the most popular. Responses were polarized at best. I learned that day that the internet can be mean. But it's always fun to talk about how our gear lists change over time, and I'm excited to make this more of a regular thing, probably seasonal. So with that, let's dive into the 5 pieces of ultralight gear that I'm ditching in 2024. Number 1, and this one definitely hurts, is my Mountain Laurel Designs Burn. I am weirdly sentimental about gear, and this is one of the first pieces of ultralight gear that I purchased. This was my first ultralight pack, so it has a very special place in my heart. It's something that I dreamed about purchasing for a very, very long time before I actually pulled the trigger. And it's been on a ton of trips, and for the most part, it looks pretty much brand new. So why am I no longer using it? Well, it's only about 1 ounce lighter than my Mountain Laurel Designs Exodus, which has about 17 liters more capacity. It's hard to justify taking the burn when the Exodus is about the same weight, and it's way easier to pack because of the increased size. Now, I'm not saying that larger packs are always better, and there's definitely such a thing as too big, especially with frameless packs. But if I'm gonna go smaller than 55 liters, which I find works well across a pretty wide range of loads, and you don't have to like cram stuff into it to make it fit, I'm gonna be making that decision based mostly on weight. So instead, I'd pick something like the Z-Pack's Nero, which is about a half a pound lighter than the burn. And honestly, I just feel kind of bad every time I go into my gear closet and grab the Exodus and see this nice pack just collecting dust. So I'd rather somebody else get a chance to enjoy it. Number 2, and this is another one that absolutely kills me, is my Mountain Laurel Designs Duomid. I kind of feel like I'm shitting on Mountain Laurel Designs today, but I promise that I'm not. I really do love their gear. And this is another piece of gear that I wanted for a really, really long time and saved up for a long time to get it. But over time, my needs and my style of hiking have changed, and this just really isn't something that I use that much anymore. This is roughly the same weight as the Z-Pack's Plex Solo that I recently purchased, except it lacks a floor and it doesn't have any bug netting. Now, modularity and the ability to swap floors and bug nets is definitely a big part of why I purchased this in the first place, but between my tarp, which is about half the weight, and the Plex Solo, which is the same weight as this, I really don't have a good use case for keeping it in my gear closet anymore. It's probably a bit better for high wind and snow than the other 2 options that I just mentioned, but for those kinds of conditions, I'll probably pick up a double-walled tent instead. I've been eyeing a Durston X-Mid Solid, which has a little bit more head and foot room, and the fly also goes all the way to the ground to keep out spin drift. Just like with the burn, I see it just sitting there collecting dust, and I know that it could make somebody else really happy, especially with the wait times on these things. And number 3 is my Bora Gear Bug Bivy. I made a video about this earlier last year and I said that I would test it out. In retrospect, the video was a little bit odd. I used it a little bit over the summer and it did a great job of keeping the bugs and mice out. But with the addition of the Plex Solo, again, it just really doesn't make a whole ton of sense to have in my gear closet anymore. The Bug Bivy plus my tarp is almost exactly the same weight as the Plex Solo, except it's a bit more fiddly to set up and it doesn't have nearly as much space inside. It's another example of a great piece of gear that I just can't find space for in my gear closet anymore. And number 4 is my Hightail Designs Fanny Pack. I made a short on this a little while ago and I bought it to hold camera gear so that it would always be at the ready. There's 2 problems with that though. The first is that I've streamlined my camera gear quite a bit, so I'm not carrying nearly as much stuff as I used to. And second, it turns out that I really don't enjoy having a bunch of stuff on the front of my body while hiking. Having this on my waist, plus having my camera pod on my chest, just felt really bulky, and I kind of lost that light on my feet feeling that I like to have while I'm on the trail. So instead, I'm just stashing my camera gear either in the camera pod itself, I can cram a whole bunch of stuff in there, or I have another small stuff sack that I've just been putting on the outside of my pack. This is a really well-made piece of gear, but this game is all about simplifying and removing things that we no longer need, and this just didn't make the cut. And number 5 are my MSR groundhog stakes. Well, sort of. I'm going to be testing out the mini groundhog stakes instead. The regular, full-length groundhog stakes are by far my favorite stakes. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I really don't care much for ultralight stakes because there's not really much point in taking stakes if they don't hold your shelter up. I've really put off testing the minis because there's not really that much of a weight difference between the full-size stakes and the mini stakes. However, there is a huge difference in size, which is really nice for packing. So I took the plunge. I'm not getting rid of my groundhogs just yet though, just in case things don't work out with the minis, because these are awesome. So there's the 5 pieces of gear that I'm ditching in 2024. It's always hard for me to get rid of gear, but there's no sense in hoarding it, especially if it's something that somebody else could use and enjoy, so I will reluctantly pass these on to a new home. If you haven't yet, check out last year's video and get in on the fun of shaming me for saying that I'm not gonna take a knife. Good times to be had over there in that comment section, clearly. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next one.